By the late 1980s, it was apparent that the Soviet Union was beginning to crumble. Ethnic issues that had been suppressed by decades of communist ideology suddenly came to the forefront. Enclaves such as Nagorno-Karabakh were swept by freedom ideologies and demanded self-determination. Partly due to Turkic ethnocentrism, violence erupted against Armenians living in Azerbaijan. The cities of Sumgait and Baku were the setting for brutal pogroms that the world noticed for a few moments, but then, as if following some arcane tradition, soon forgot. The Russians under Gorbachev urged the Armenian world, which was reeling from a devastating earthquake, to wait for a peaceful solution. The Armenians of Artsakh, however, decided that they were the captains of their fate and defended themselves. Karabakh, or Artsakh in the ancient tongue, claimed that it had the right to self-rule under Soviet law. Azerbaijan claimed the territory was under its sovereign jurisdiction. For a time, the tides of war turned against the 150,000 Armenians, losing much of their land to Azerbaijan in 1992. But the tides shifted again in 1993, partly due to changing politics within Azerbaijan and a politically unstable Russia, allowing the inhabitants to reclaim their own villages and create security zones at Lachin, Fizuli, Kelbajar, and Akhdam. The world, which seemed to have been sleeping up to now, suddenly woke up and decried the actions of Karabakh as aggressive. Oil money helped Azerbaijan win some political support within the United Nations and the West, as well as military aid. U.S. oil companies sent mercenaries to train Azeri troops. Even Afghanistan sent Mujahideen mercenaries. Turkey, a NATO ally with its own ethnic agenda, had laid claims to the Armenian region of Zangezur. Sending aid to Azerbaijan, Turkey hoped to crush both Armenia and Artsakh and create a corridor of influence on all Turkic peoples. Russia, dealing with the chaos in its government, could only play both sides against each other. Armenia, surrounded as usual by instability and hostility, fell on difficult times. The news media, however, turned a deaf ear, choosing to ignore the over 50,000 casualties of a major war in its 6th year. The historic northern region of Shahumyan remained isolated, its soldiers living on what was considered by them the worst front of the war. And as Little Artsakh fought numerically superior Azerbaijan to a standstill, what was once a virtual Garden of Eden started to become a graveyard. Some years ago, 2 Armenians from Fresno volunteered to help the inhabitants of Nagorno-Karabakh in their war for independence. At that time, most of Karabakh had been captured by Azerbaijan, a former Soviet republic. The Armenians of Karabakh were faced with superior Azeri forces, whose overlords did not want to give up the rich pasture lands and resources that had been handed to them by Stalin. Garo Kakejian and Shai Ajamian returned time after time, eventually forming a volunteer unit called the Crusaders. Bringing help and supplies from the United States, Kakejian led his reconnaissance force in battle after battle, in places like Taziken, Hatrut, Kelbajak, Haruchunagomet, Mardaker, and finally Magauz. Magauz was the last time the White Bear would fight. A year later, I met Ajamian, who had continued Garo's work. He was planning to return to Karabakh and asked me to go along. One camera makes the noise of 1,000 guns, he said. The unit was now led by Armenian-born Artur Pogosyan, another of Kakejian's old comrades. With new members in a 15-man force codenamed Spidak Arch, Ajamian and the rest were flown to the newly retaken mountains over Gulistan, in the region of Shahumyan, where along with a garrison called Yevni, they would face off against a 500-strong Azeri regiment. Some of the Spidak Arches, including Pogosyan, had already spent a grueling winter in the forests. On April 24, 1994, the Azeris stormed Gyoktapa. Hours later, they were beaten back into the trees. While the Եղնիկes and Arches were up in the mountains to the north, a battalion was attempting to retake the region near Bashir. At the beginning of May, I found myself in a trench, overlooking a fearsome artillery exchange. Though the Armenians had once fought in the safety of the hills they knew so well, Chailu was wide open terrain. On this day, the Karabakh forces would give over 50 killed and many more wounded. The battle was taking place by the same mountain ranges Kakejian had fallen, not a few hundred yards from where I now sought shelter from the rain of shells. Sudden bad weather brought the day's operations to a standstill. Both sides were blinded by the heavy fog. Rain had re-soaked the muddy roads, making travel on them nearly impossible. There are no paved roads this far north. One guy even asked me which I liked more, the Russian Vilis or the American Jeep Wrangler.
Jeep'e.
I said theirs was better.
Ha.
I lied.
Oyaga. En gelink.